Right, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, it's Antony Carpen here in, if I can call it, Queen Edith's proper, outside the Queen Edith's pub. Now, this part of Cambridge is the only ward currently inside the city boundaries that is in the constituency of South Cambridgeshire, which is Heidi Allen's area. And every so often I come to what is now the revamped Queen Edith's pub, been run brilliantly actually by the Milton Brewery. Because before then, if you can see the flats behind me there, that's actually where the pub used to be. And it was unused for many, many years until the Milton Brewery stepped in and reopened it. And so for quite some time, Queen Edith's, almost in direct contrast to Mill Road, it was the only ward in the city, I believe, that at the time did not have a pub between the closing of the old Queen Edith and the opening of the new one. I'm walking down Wolfston Way. We've got the Wolfston Way shops over there, and many moons ago, in particular at primary school, we would go to the sweet shop and buy sweets, because in those days, when you're about like 10, it was quite a distance away in terms of bike ride. But my old school friend Chris, who lived in one of the new build houses just off Beaumont Road, we would have to cycle through here, pick up his sister with his mum before heading over to his place, because in those days, kind of as with now, Cambridge was not immune to having siblings separated in different primary schools because of pressure of places. Now, as I mentioned, we're walking down Wolfston Way, and some of you are probably wondering who Queen Edith was. And a local architect and local resident, Jeremy Lander, who, when he moved here, kind of asked the same question as, who was Queen Edith? And it turns out, in his brilliant study of how this ward came about, that a lot of the land prior to the Battle of Hastings was owned by Harold II's common law wife called Edith. But it wasn't, I think, for royal purposes and for church purposes, recognised as kind of like a royal match. Hence Harold marrying again. There is another Edith, though, who was Queen Edith, and that was, and again this is Jeremy Lander's research that has shown this, Queen Edith, who was Edward the Confessor's wife. And funnily enough, after Edward the Confessor died, it was Harold Godwinson who became Harold II, Harold, son of Godwin. And funnily enough, we are walking down Godwin Way. And down Godwin Way, you've also got Queen Edith's primary school. And one of the really interesting things about this ward, in terms of both its history and its makeup, is it's got this interesting mix of homes that are primarily, and in this part of the ward very much the case, that are current or ex-council homes. And a number of my school friends used to live on this estate. One, Anna Marie, who I met up with very, very recently, we hadn't seen each other probably for the best part of 2 decades. And it was kind of it was really surreal meeting up with her and a couple of other people, again, who I hadn't seen since the other side of the millennium. And this, as you see, walking past Queen Edith's primary school, there is also another primary school here which has recently opened on the site of the old Nether Hall lower school called Queen Emma, which is named after Queen Emma of Normandy, I believe. And Emma was first married to Ethelred the Unready, and in the old history books, they say he was called Ethelred the Unready because he was unready to be king. But I think, if I recall correctly, Jeremy Lander's research says that's not actually the case. It actually meant he was badly advised. And it turned out he was badly advised because his successor, Edmund Ironside, found himself facing a huge battle with King Canute, the Danish king, who also became the first Danish king of England and ultimately ended up marrying Queen Emma. So it all got a bit complicated. And like I said, because a lot of the land around here was originally owned by Edith, Harold's common-law wife, otherwise known as Edith Swanneck, kind of a reflection of her beauty at the time, that is where the estate gets its name from. So you could actually say this estate has got three queens. We've got Queen Elizabeth, the current monarch. We've got Queen Edith, albeit incorrectly identified. And we've also got Queen Emma. The ward with three queens. And it's actually, like I said, in this area, like I said, Anna Marie, and also another good friend of mine from secondary school at the time, Martin Oldham, lived around here. And in particular in the early to mid-90s, this was times of just the start of huge social changes that were happening in Cambridge. And one of the things, certainly, that I noticed, in particular in the mid-90s, was how stuck out on the edge of town it felt we were, and that actually going into the town centre, when we were younger, was actually quite a big deal. And also at the same time, when I look back on it, there was also the huge changes that were happening in the 1990s, the huge social changes around culture, and in particular sexuality and drugs, because mine was the generation that I call, we were the last of the ignorant. So we were the last to go through secondary school without this thing called the internet. And so, if I can call them the authorities, whether it's church, whether it's school, whether it's parents, we were the last to grow up with, if I can call it, that absolute level of information control. Whereas now, it's the complete opposite. Now we are living in a time where parents, authorities, don't have that level of information control. Any child can, through social media, always come up with a source of knowledge that is going to be significantly more trustworthy and expert than anything any teacher or parent or priest can come up with. And also at the same time, and I don't know whether it's the first time in history it's happened, but where children in particular in all things social and digital media have more knowledge than the parents. And this is being reflected in some of the advertising that we're seeing, in particular a recent one with Virgin Media, basically portraying these very panicked parents facing a group of 7-year-olds, basically saying, you know, we are the future and we know how this stuff works and you don't. And it's like, what are we going to do? So we're now coming up to the junction of Tilliard Way and Godwin Way, and actually this small group of lawns that we have here, if you just see over there, in the mid-1990s we used to play football there, much to the annoyance of one or two of the families there. Obviously the trees are now much bigger and you wouldn't be able to get away with that now. So I'm just trying to get a camera angle that works with the sun not shining at me, because I'm actually heading off to another music rehearsal with the music collective that was known as the Housing Sound Collective, but is now known as We Are Sound, because I believe of a legal wrangle. But can I go that side now? Yeah. But legal wrangle now seems over and we've effectively relaunched. So we've got another gig coming up at the Con Exchange in December, if you're around. Now, walking down Tillyard Way, I believe there was also a councillor with a surname of that name. And every so often you'll come across new roads that are named after local authority figures. What we're finding actually in the northwest of the city is they're now named after scientists and researchers and people like that. But I'm not entirely sure what I'll have to look that one up. What is the process of deciding what a road name is going to be? Kind of as an aside, I really hope we're not going down the route of having roads sponsored by multinational corporations. Anyway, another interesting road where another old school friend from years ago who I've not seen again this side of the millennium used to live down Ventress Close. Now, in this part of Queen Edith was a farm called Ventress Farm, and just further up that way on the other side of Queen Emma Primary School is Ventress Farm Close, which is again where a number of post-war properties were built as the city expanded, because all of these properties are effectively post-war council or ex-council properties that a number of them have been built out by their owners and sold on further. Some of them, unfortunately, certainly from my perspective, have become student properties, even though they actually were never built for that, but such as the housing market. Again, not the fault of the students, it's the fault of central government, mainly for their mismanagement, and then obviously the local authorities for basically not managing the city properly. But in the grand scheme of things, from my perspective, it's central government for not giving local government the powers. Now, the view that you see here with Queen Emma, and I'm just going to pause for a bit here just to do a little bit of a talk, because this area has changed quite significantly over the past 20 years. Queen Emma, if I switch the camera around, looks like that. As you can see, various people are going in now. Now, if you look at this photograph, which was taken by John Sutton, who used to be the head of English here, and also used to live around the corner. I used to go to school with his two sons. That's what it used to look like. Now, if we look down here, this is an extended pathway that used to link what was the old lower school and upper school site. But as you can see, it's very much marked off. What we've also got on the other side, and some of you may remember I did a video on this for a previous rehearsal. If I just switch the camera around like so, you'll see the footpath and cycle path to Cherry Hinton Hall, a whole part of town. And I think one of the things that potentially made this ward very interesting in terms of its social mix was you had people living in very, very affluent homes who would send their children to the same school as those people who lived on council estates. And actually, when we were younger, it really didn't make much difference as to what your social background was. People didn't care. Friends were friends. Funnily enough, it was only Sorry, I'm growling at flying sewing machines up there because I can't really hear myself speak when they're flying. But it was only after we got to sixth forms that I really noticed this polarisation of people in terms of just how affluent their families were, and it was something that I'd never seen before, and I think it was something that I never really knew how to deal with. And I think again when I got to university, I noticed something very, very similar, and it was just something that I could A, never get my head round, and B, I both never got used to and never accepted. And funnily enough, when I got into the civil service, it was something that, fortunately, I was able to work in policy areas that helped to overcome those sorts of barriers. And it's one of the reasons why, with the projects that I'm doing, that I'm adopting this idea of Cambridge and the people of Cambridge behaving as one city rather than kind of the various different and sometimes conflicting community interests that there are. The main reason for that is, and you only have to look at some of the house prices around here, is that the interests that you have here are just so much greater than any of the individual community groups, that actually the only way to deal with them, and we're beginning to see this now coalescing around the feedback into the city deal processes, the only way really to respond to that is if the whole city comes together and actually say, well, actually, look, we've got an alternative vision for what we are and what we can become. So, hopefully that will continue. Anyway, there will be, I think, one more video I'm going to be making about Queen Edith, and it's going to be around Addenbrooke's, so stick around for that.